the enslaved boy accidentally discovered that the widowed lady next door had hired a painter who was anything but ordinary. He was clearly painting her portrait. Yet the two of them happily chatted. Just a few warm words made the lady's heart flutter. Soon their behavior became a bit too close. This sparked great curiosity in the enslaved boy, who watched silently from the shadows. But he never imagined that after knowing each other for only one day, the two would embrace in broad daylight. Jealousy surged inside him and he quickly ran home. Even his mother didn't understand why he was so worked up. Like a wounded child, he locked himself in his room and struggled to catch his breath. That night, the hired painter said he would be leaving the next day, but Sarah felt uneasy. Her heart was full of longing and reluctance, hoping they could meet again soon, but neither of them imagined that their love would be filled with unimaginable twists and hardships. The next day, after the painter left, Sarah went alone to the place where they had met the day before, but her movements were noticed by the enslaved boy next door. After a moment of restless thought, he followed her with ill intent, perhaps still holding on to the tenderness she had experienced with the painter. The lady sat on the grass and savored the memory, but she had no idea that the enslaved boy was sneaking toward her. When Sarah saw someone approaching, she immediately stood up and put on her coat.
What are you doing here?
Oh, I come here sometimes, just like you.
Just like me? I've only been here once before.
I know. I seen you. Where you going?
Stay away from me!
As night fell, a group of enslaved workers called the lady's name across the fields. Everyone was anxious and searched everywhere for Sarah's whereabouts. Soon, a kind overseer found the disheveled and distressed lady, clearly harmed. He quickly called for others to come help. Meanwhile, the boy who had committed the wrongdoing was at home absorbed in drinking, and even his mother sensed something was off. The boy, still not fully aware of the severity of his actions, had even taken the lady's cloak. At that moment, the overseer from next door burst in. The boy was shot and killed, but since this was not their own farm, it was hard to escape the landowner's questioning. The scene shifts, and Sarah has suffered severe emotional and physical trauma. The doctor wrote a prescription before leaving and told the elderly, enslaved man caring for her to make sure the lady stayed in bed for a few more days. The overseer who had shot the boy next door prepared to take $500 and go to Philadelphia under Sarah's father-in-law's instruction to avoid further trouble. But soon, after a shout outside, the owner of the neighboring farm arrived. The house steward Floyd stepped outside to deal with him. The old master told him to take a gun for protection, but the steward firmly refused. The man opened the door, but he too was an enslaved worker, and the plantation owner across the way thought he didn't even deserve to speak, raising his whip to strike him.
Your life ain't worth a busted hamstring off this place, Floyd.
I'm a free man.
A free man you one of these days, nigga.
Even if Floyd had been a free man, the neighbors still would have looked down on him, but causing trouble here for the sake of someone who had already passed, especially when that person had committed wrongdoing first, made the neighbor cautious, so he eventually left. Whether he would truly let this go remained uncertain. That night, after Sarah finished giving instructions to the overseer, the man set off for Philadelphia. Once she had settled everything at home, she quietly went to her portrait and touched the painter's handwriting with her fingers. But how could she face the man she cared for with a body that had been violated? Thinking of this, she knelt on the floor and cried in pain, letting out all the grief she had held inside. 2 months passed in the blink of an eye, and Sarah received a letter from the painter. She happily wanted to tell her father-in-law, hoping he could give her some advice. Her former husband had been gone for many years, and she had been managing a large farm alone. Feeling the absence of someone who truly cared for her, the old man agreed without hesitation. He knew Sarah was a kind and courageous daughter-in-law, and that it had not been easy for her to live alone all these years. With her father-in-law's approval, she went to the hotel where they had agreed to meet. She was filled with anticipation to see the man she loved, yet her heart was uneasy because of what had happened 2 months earlier. After collecting herself, she opened the door and found that the painter had arranged for a waiter to deliver food and dessert beforehand. Just as the waiter introduced the fine champagne, the painter suddenly appeared behind her. They exchanged few words, embracing each other without hesitation, and spent a warm and gentle night together. Perhaps this was the happiest day of Sarah's life, with the man she loved by her side in a moment of peace untouched by worry. But time spent together is always brief. As tensions between the North and South intensified and disagreements over abolition grew, war was about to break out. Casey, long known as an artist, was actually from the North. so he chose to enlist there and said goodbye to the woman he loved. Though Sarah was reluctant, she could not bring herself to say more in the face of Casey's determination, wishing only that he would return safely. A year passed quickly. The Southern Army suffered defeat after defeat under the fierce offensive of the Northern forces. People across the South were displaced, and wounded soldiers filled every corner of the cities. While Sarah was still living quietly on the plantation, a maid rushed in to report that a group of soldiers from the north was approaching. When she stepped outside, she discovered that the leader of the group was Casey, something she never expected. But in a time of scarce supplies, he didn't greet her with old affection, because he was under orders to collect food from the farms. With Sarah's agreement that her servants would not be harmed, Casey ordered his men to take all the food and supplies they could find. Once the soldiers began searching, Casey approached the worried Sarah and explained the harsh truth. Only by doing this could he prevent other troops from causing even greater destruction. Though he warned that irregular forces might still come again, he hoped she would understand his dilemma and move her most valuable possessions somewhere safe as soon as possible. But she could not grasp his intentions and could only watch as the soldiers carried away her animals and supplies like raiders. After enough had been taken, Casey ordered his men to move to the next location. Whether Sarah, filled with tears, could forgive the man she had once loved was unknown, but at least she took some of his advice and asked the steward to move all precious items to safety before further trouble arrived. Yet Sarah could never have imagined the immense disaster that would soon strike the plantation. As expected, the next day another group of soldiers arrived nearby. After watching from the window, Sarah immediately told all the enslaved women to hide. Two women who were praying suddenly realized that the soldiers from the north had already forced their way into the house. They dragged the pregnant daughter-in-law into a back room and acted with cruel intent. No matter how hard the older woman pounded on the door, she could not stop what those soldiers were doing. This was the tragedy of the northern troops advancing through the south, claiming to fight under a banner of justice while committing acts that betrayed that claim. The enslaved women on the plantations became targets for soldiers looking for amusement. Sarah, the mistress of the farm, tried to stop their behavior but was powerless. Fortunately, only some furniture remained in the grand estate, because Sarah had already instructed the servants to move all valuable items the night before. But the soldiers persisted, even digging up the family graveyard. The elderly enslaved man who had served the family for 4 generations could no longer bear the sight and struck the soldiers with his cane, but he was pushed to the ground. Tragically, he hit his head on a stone and passed away. That night, a large soldier walked out of the steward's small wooden house. Sarah and another servant sensed danger and rushed inside. The woman inside was shaken and disheveled, and she was pregnant. It was impossible to imagine the emotional trauma she had just endured. Sarah, filled with anger, confronted the officer leading the troops and accused them of their inhumane behavior. But the officer refused to let her confront him freely. He pulled out a knife and demanded to know where the family's valuables were hidden. A property this large couldn't possibly have nothing worth taking. When he saw 2 rings on Sarah's hand, he took them without hesitation. One was small but made of gold. The other was the ring the steward had crafted for her from a horseshoe when she married. He tossed it on the ground. Then the soldiers left the Beulah estate. Seeing her home devastated, Sarah wept in pain, feeling she had failed the husband she had lost years ago. At sunrise, the steward returned to the farm and had a boy retrieve the hidden pistol. Sensing he planned something dangerous, Sarah demanded that the gun be handed over. But after his wife had been harmed and his mother beaten to death, how could he remain silent? He had also heard from a soldier of color that the officer who led the raid would be traveling alone to Savannah, so the steward planned to intercept him and avenge his mother. Under cover of night, the man followed the officer's trail. What he didn't expect was that Sarah's grandson followed him. The boy's father had died in battle, and now his home had been destroyed, so he wanted to join the steward in bringing justice. Although Floyd thought the boy was being reckless, he could only accept it. Soon they saw a campfire ahead, clearly where the officer had stopped to rest. Without weapons of their own, they could only have the boy hide in the shadows and wait for Floyd's signal. Floyd approached slowly, but the officer had anticipated trouble and pressed a gun to Floyd's head. He suspected Floyd had come for revenge, as the officer had harmed many innocent people in the area. Floyd quickly denied it, claiming he was a runaway looking for food. His performance was convincing enough to make the officer lower his guard slightly. Seeing no weapon on Floyd, the officer loosened his grip, set the gun down and tossed him a piece of bread, telling him he could stay as long as he did not try anything. But when the officer was about to sleep, the sound of the boy moving through the bushes raised his suspicion again. Believing Floyd had an accomplice, he prepared to shoot him. At that critical moment, young Roscoe rushed forward and knocked the gun from the officer's hand. and Floyd quickly retrieved it. The situation changed instantly. The officer begged for mercy and even offered half of the valuables he had taken, but Floyd revealed who he was. He intended not only to reclaim everything stolen from the estate, but also to take the officer's life. The moment the officer realized things had taken a deadly turn and tried to fight back, the steward struck first without hesitation. The boy beside him, still burning with anger, crawled forward and delivered a few more blows. The next day, the steward and the boy returned triumphantly, bringing back everything that had been taken. Sarah joyfully stepped forward to greet them, for Floyd had become the great hero of the farm. What touched her even more was that he had recovered her wedding ring, and Sarah gratefully embraced the loyal man. No one else knew that the two of them had once shared an unspoken bond when they were young. Life had to move forward, and the home needed rebuilding. But that day an uninvited guest arrived. It was Casey, the man Sarah both loved and resented. He had come to tell her the war was over and that he would be staying in the South to serve. But Sarah still held bitterness toward what he had done before. Even though she still loved him deeply, perhaps the vows they once made were destined to end as an irreparable tragedy. Soon it was 1872, and although the family treated their black workers kindly, Roscoe faced discrimination when he tried to pursue a girl he liked. The girl was quickly pulled away by her mother, leaving Roscoe upset. Sarah noticed her grandson's worries when the steward told her that the newly appointed officers in town were actually white supremacists. Sarah immediately confronted them. She urged them to respect every black citizen's rights, reminding them that the war had ended and slavery was abolished, and that officers should not interfere in people's lives. But reality was far harsher. After Sarah and the others went home, Roscoe went alone to shop and was mocked again by the officers.
Plenty of white people out of work. Your grandma keeps a nigger over. Don't you ever get tired of taking orders from niggers?
I'm gonna get you. I'm gonna get you. Cool down, Roof. Now look here, boy. I seen what you done, and you're lucky I don't lock you up for assault. Now get on out of here.
Even though black people in the South were now free, many refused to accept equality and carried anger in their hearts. The formerly enslaved workers now found jobs and worked hard to build their own lives. Sarah's estate, once destroyed by war, had regained its former prosperity. She now managed a lumber mill, supported by a group of hard-working black workers, giving the future hope. One day, Sarah and Roscoe attended an event at the church. As everyone chatted happily, a speeding carriage rushed toward them. Roscoe recognized it as their own and called for someone to stop it. When everyone gathered around, they discovered that Floyd had been shot and killed. Heartbroken, Sarah tried to climb onto the carriage, but a white onlooker stopped her. Some people even murmured that it wasn't worth grieving over a black man, but none of them understood the bond between Sarah and the steward. With her grandson's help, she climbed onto the carriage. No voices could stop her from getting close to the one who had protected her for years. Overwhelmed with grief, Sarah fainted. At her cousin's request, Roscoe carried his grandmother inside. The next day, the family held a funeral for the loyal steward, and Sarah could not bear to leave. They all knew who had done it, but they lacked the power to seek justice, so they could only face the truth in silence. Sarah vowed to care for Floyd's only child, taking him away from the farm and sending him to the best school in town. It was the only way she could repay the devotion Floyd had given all his life. Life is full of partings and reunions. Since the steward's passing, Sarah's deepest source of comfort was gone. Lonely and reflective, she looked at the portrait on the wall and recalled her days with Casey. Was he somewhere thinking of her too? A year later, using her own wealth, Sarah founded a school for black children. Many children from nearby areas sang happily as they approached. But things were far from peaceful. Gunshots rang out as officers in town fired their weapons under the excuse of target practice, deliberately creating obstacles for the black children on the road.
Sheriff Barnes, make these men move out of the way so my children can enter.
Well, I'm sorry, ma'am, but these gentlemen here are on public property, and there just ain't no law against target practice.
Sarah furiously condemned the sheriff's behavior and told the children to line up and follow her to the school. Yet the officers continued firing carelessly. At that critical moment, a group of people arrived in horse-drawn carriages. The slightly graying man at the front was none other than Casey, the man Sarah had longed for in her heart. But because misunderstandings still lingered between them, Sarah held back from embracing him. Casey introduced himself to the sheriff as a colonel, and behind him stood an incoming federal marshal. Then Casey ordered his men to bring out a camera. He planned to expose the sheriff's behavior by publishing it in the newspapers and create the first scandal after abolition, undermining the sheriff's actions. Realizing Casey's intent, one officer attempted to act, but the marshal prepared to intervene. Fortunately, the sheriff knew better and stopped his subordinate. After the chaos, the children were finally able to enter the school. Casey left without a word, reluctant to look back. Watching him walk away, Sarah wondered if she would let him go again. Perhaps this was her last chance to reclaim her love. She asked the boy beside her to stop the carriage, then gathered her courage and spoke the long-buried words in her heart.
Don't go. Stay here. We need you. I need you.
After decades filled with hardships and misunderstandings, the two who loved each other were finally reunited. Thus ends the tale of the Beulah Lands. I'm a film enthusiast. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe. See you next time.